Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. But first and foremost, we have another musical episode, which I'm like, that's so cool, because I gave the magicians credits for this, but I do appreciate the fact that Riverdale has made a point to have like at least one musical a season. I feel like, didn't they have like two last season? I don't remember, because I feel like they kind of blur together in my head, but like, I think season 2 was like the first time they ever did a musical, if I remember correctly. And I think they had two last season, but maybe I'm misremembering, whatever the case may be. This whole situation is about having a variety show, and the fact is, obviously, Kevin, who handles a lot of those shows, I think he just never gets enough credit for the fact that he sets up these killer performances and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, he wants to perform a particular musical, which obviously I'm not a musical person. I've never really cared too much about musicals. It's just because of stuff like this and The Magician that made me care about musicals. I'm like, oh, this is so tight. I mean, I used to be one of those people who skipped musicals during. I didn't really care. They were there, fine. They were part of a Disney movie or whatever. I wasn't that big of a fan of them. But now that I'm older, I appreciate them more. So who knows like how I feel about musicals in general, but I'm going on a tangent. The fact is he's wanting to do one particular, was it Hedwig, but it's like he can't do it because of, I guess because of the content of it or whatever. But obviously for Kevin, it's like it's a very representation of their generation of like this world and kind of like, you know, struggles of identity and stuff like that. And I think for him, especially for him, because later on he brought up an interesting point of why this is almost so important to him. It made him feel like himself. Like he hasn't quite been himself since that farm stuff. Like he was, you know, the farm kind of basically roped him in to kind of feed on, you know, the sadness and loneliness that he was kind of going through, and it kind of shifted him, and now kind of being deprogrammed and everything. It's like you want to go back to feeling a little bit normal. I mean, to be fair, that's what this episode was kind of supposed to represent, kind of everyone getting a little bit of normal back after everything that they've been through, you know? So I think that kind of, you know, that's what it resonated for Kevin, and that's why he wanted to put on this performance. And I did kind of like that, like certain, like, you know, aspects of like, especially the first song. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, like you're treating us like, rather than treating us like individuals, you're treating us just like numbers, because that's all you see. And I love that literally Cheryl had to be the only one with a red number. Like everyone else had yellow numbers except for her, because she's number 4, but her 4 is red. I'm like, of course, it's Cheryl, because Cheryl's got to always rock the red. But nevertheless. But I do like how they transitioned a lot of stuff, especially like at one point, like Archie, like they go into one room and then like Archie walks out of the room in a different clothes, like, because it's I like how they blend the musicals where it's like the musical is almost like in their head, it's a part of the performance and it's part of the story, but it doesn't it's almost like, imagine the musical aspects are in someone's head, like, oh, that whole thing didn't happen, even though there's trash on the ground from it happening. But maybe that's just because of the way they like went to like they treated it more like an actual, I don't know, just like the way they like edited it and just like transitioned between scenes and stuff like that. It just made me feel like it was very handled, almost like it was, and the entire episode was treated like a stage performance, you know. But despite everything, Honey was super against it. And I can never, like, it's so interesting with Honey's story, because I'm curious to see where they kind of take it, whether they'll really do anything with it like that. But it's like, the fact is, I get it, literally everything that's going down in Riverdale, in particular, everything that's going down in Riverdale High, I can understand they need someone there to kind of bounce things out. That's always been his main thing, to kind of steer Riverdale High back in the right direction. But it's like, it seems like he overcorrects, but I guess it's like, considering all the terrible shit that's going down in Riverdale, you kind of need that overcorrection. But it's just like, he's very particular about certain things, which obviously, you know, even like, you know, Cheryl had kind of thrown it at him, like, oh, like the fact of the matter is, like, making it seem like the fact that you kind of have such an issue about this seems like it might be like almost like a sexual orientation based thing of like, oh, like, you know, because Cheryl's trying to say, like, you know, the songs can speak to everyone, the performances can speak to everyone, even someone as kind of straight-laced as you know, with this whole situation. But like, obviously, you know, it's something that means a lot to everyone, in particular Kevin, you know. And even that song he was, you know, singing with Betty, Veronica, Tony, and Cheryl, you know, it's like he gets to be someone else for a minute before having to go back to be himself. I think that's why he loves the performance of it all. And, you know, I even love like when they're kind of doing their silent protest, and I forgot, I want to say it was Reggie that was like, you don't want to see me, like, you don't want me. I forgot what he said. It was so good. I was like, yeah, Reggie. I forgot what he said. Like, it was something basically referencing the Hills. He was like, you don't want to see me like go off on you. Like, I forgot the phrasing. I know I feel so bad about it, but it was like, yeah, hell yeah, Reggie. But then, because like Honey at first was like threatening to cancel, like if anyone performed any performances from this at the variety show, that they would be banned from the senior prom. But then they had their silent protest, but he just basically canceled the variety show. So that sucked even more. And so, but luckily, they were able to have it at, Le Bon Nuit. Very nice turnout. And I love that. It's just like, especially when they were singing the song about like, it's like, basically saying like Archie, Veronica, Betty, and Choni being Cheryl and Tony, and then Reggie. He was like, yeah! I was like, I love your energy, Reggie. You're so good. I love that you're kind of basically the hype man of the episode. But nevertheless, I thought that was really dope, and it was a killer performance. But obviously, not just that. Like, there's, it's not just a musical episode. There's a lot to kind of break down too. Like, the fact this is so interesting because literally last episode, someone was like, have they completely forgotten about the tapes? I'm like, I figured that'd be a storyline they'd probably circle back to, because I was like, they're just going to forget. I was like, yeah, because they stopped. So that's why they kind of try to move past it. But now it's like, after everything, now they pop up, which is interesting. Like, why it happens to be now out of any time. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But along with that, it's like, obviously, like I said, everyone's got their struggles. Like Jughead, after the whole Stonewall thing, like he has to catch up with his classes if he wants to be able to graduate, now with everyone, And so that's a lot to kind of catch up on. But Betty's trying to, like, she's kind of going out of her way to kind of set things up to make it possible for him. But at the same time, Jughead is moonlighting, working with Charles to figure out this whole taped situation. Just because I think for Jughead, it's just like after everything, it's like once he's gotten that itch, he has to scratch it like that. It's like it's a mystery that needs to be solved, and it's just like it's probably going to be that complicated thing for Jughead, and I think Betty too. Betty, interestingly enough, seems like she was able to kind of back away from it, but I think for Jughead, he lives kind of for the mystery. It kind of seems like Betty kind of lives for them too, but maybe just everything kind of made her decide like, no, we'll take a step back, especially because she's so focused on like not worried about the mystery. She's worried about making sure Jughead's able to graduate with her and Archie and Veronica and everybody. So, but for Jughead, I think it's just a thing of like maybe just after all the chaotic stuff that went down, because he even talks about later on when Betty eventually found out about him lying about what he's up to. Instead of focusing on his work, he's been doing this. It's just because for her, it's like, I put all this effort into doing all this for you, but you're not taking advantage of it. Like, but for him, it's like, I literally died and gave back to life. So it's like, I'm sorry if that kind of changed things. And I think for him, it's like he feels a little out of control. So this gives him something like I can sink my teeth into, I can focus on, I can, I think he's trying to get back to some form of normal after everything. Like, he hasn't really shown that it's bothered him, but dying and coming back to life can't be the easiest thing to kind of just snap back from. So there's that. Veronica and Archie have their issues because, for one, Archie's signing them up for, a performance and everything as the Archies. And I love Jughead being like, what, was me taken? And he's like, no, we can change the name. It's like, no, it's good. I was almost halfway. My mind was immediately like, so are they gonna all like wear red wigs? That'd be kind of cool, but it turned not to be that thing, type of thing. But nevertheless, because in my head I was like, well, I was about to say, I guess it's a little inspiration from, because of it. Like, he also looked at his dad's guitar, and like his dad's band was like the Fredheads, and I was also thinking like, like Josie and the Pussycats, but at least it's Josie and the Pussycats, and not just, hey, we're the Josies. So I get the whole situation behind it. It was just kind of interesting. But nevertheless, Archie knew kind of a little bit about the fact is that Hiram was struggling a little bit because at the gym and everything, like he saw Hiram kind of struggling. He's like, oh, maybe you should take it easy. But he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, Veronica told me about your condition. He's like, it's kind of like not her business or your business. Like, he's like, I'm fine. And he was like, so kind of stay out of my business. And he's like, you understand? And then Archie's like, I understand. And obviously Veronica got pissed at him later on because it's like, how could you not say anything until now? But it's like, Well, for one, he's like when your dad says something, when Hiram Lodge says something, you kind of listen to him, which is like, considering your dad's history with Archie, you would be a little more like, yeah, I can understand why you'd be afraid, considering all the history. It's like we're at a decent place right now. It doesn't erase the really complicated history I have with your dad of like, yeah, not the type of dude. He's a very scary dude. So when he says back off, you back off. But for Veronica, it's a thing of like, how like scary this is for me. Like the fact is, she didn't go this far, but I think, and I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but I think she kind of implies almost like, what it's like with, like having lost your dad. I would think that you'd be a little more considerate and like, okay, like you would give me a little more heads up. But at the same time, she really like, it's a complicated thing where it's like, you get where she's coming from. At the same time, she's hurt. The fact is she's scared. So obviously she's kind of lashing out, and so obviously the whole thing with Archie and Betty singing, and it's like, oh, them reminiscing a little bit and stuff. I'm like, oh, because he's like, oh, when's the last good time? And they make reference to like something from first grade. I was like, oh, okay. And they're singing and stuff, and they're around the microphone. I was like, is this gonna? And I'm like, oh, and they kiss. I was like, oh, dude. To be fair, we knew this was gonna happen just because, like, it's like, oh, that whole you and Betty and Archie kissing thing. Was that? It's like, no. It was just for the performance and stuff like that. But then afterwards, like when they were texting and stuff like that, like Archie wanted to say more than he ended up saying, and it just like. You're like, it's because the sad thing is, it's always been there. Like, they've set that up since the beginning of the series, and it's always been there to some degree. They just kind of fought it, but it's like they've known each other for so long, and it's like I said, it's just that bond that they have, and it's just like they were both in a vulnerable moment at the time, and it's just like it's nice to have something comforting and familiar, I think. But then they both feel guilty about it because Jughead apologizes to Betty and Veronica apologizes to Archie, and it's like, oh, we can do this whole performance thing together. You're like, ooh, that's going to be awkward. And then Betty and Archie like holding their hands to their windows, staring at each other like star-crossed lovers, and it's like, this is a complicated situation because it's like, well, it's like part of it's like, well, maybe the best thing to do would be to break up, but it's like kind of the worst time considering everything Jughead went through, everything Veronica's dealing with right now with her dad, because it turns out like because her dad had a fall, that's what kind of set everything in motion. But it's a good thing too, because if this hadn't happened, like if she hadn't kind of known what she knows now and kind of forced him to go to the doctors and stuff like that, they wouldn't have found out that like, oh, it could have been much worse than a fall and everything. So it's like, granted the performance kind of went off. It was like, oh, it was a great performance, but at the same time, you can still see them kind of looking at each other. It's like, oh, this is awkward. You're wondering if like Jughead or Veronica's picked up on it. Doesn't seem like they have at all, but still. So it's just like, that's going to be an interesting storyline going forward, like where that's going. So part of me is like, it's that, like, because at the same time, you kind of, like, in the beginning, I probably would have been totally all about, like, oh yeah, like, Betty and Archie is like, sure, like, because I'm one of those people that's very, like, when they set up a couple situation, that once that's kind of set up, it's like, usually it's like, oh, these are kind of like the characters that the show kind of, or story or whatever pushes together. Most people fight against that. I don't. I'm kind of like, oh my god, yeah, like for me, Titus and Una, like that's obviously 100% canon. If you don't want to referencing Final Fantasy X, gotta get in my Final Fantasy references. A great example also would be like any type of harem, like anime or manga, where it's like, oh, there's multiple girls, but everyone's got their waifu. Or in the reverse harem situation, they're husbandos. But the fact of the matter is, there's always going to be that number one waifu for some people, and it's never 100 for a lot of people. They don't like it being like, oh, this is the one that the story's pushing together. I'm going on a whole little tangent, but there is a point to it. The fact of the matter is, Betty and Archie were kind of set up at the beginning. It was kind of a this and that. So normal circumstances, it's like, oh, this is what I want. But Betty and Jughead have been such good couple, and so it's Veronica and Archie that I'm like, I would not want them to walk away from this broken hearted. So like now I'm like, it leaves me conflicted because I'm like, oh, Archie and Betty would be so adorable together because that's kind of something the show would kind of push together. But at the same time, it's like these couples have been established for seasons. This ain't just kind of like, oh, like a couple episode love affair type of situation. If that was the case, fine, Archie, Betty, all the way. But it's like, come on, what is Veronica and Archie's ship name? Because I know Betty and Jughead are Bughead. So whatever the case may be, it's just this one makes me feel even more complicated. I'm just like I'm like, come on, dude, like what's I don't know which way I want to lean. I kind of want things to kind of stay the way they are, but sadly, where things are, there's no going back. Like, things are going to get more and more complicated going forward, because now they have this like big secret like we made out, and it's like, are we going to tell? Am I ever going to tell Veronica? Am I ever going to tell Jughead? That's on both of their sides. It's both their friends as well as their significant others. It's like, that's a very complicated situation. I don't envy them being in. So there's that whole situation. But also, once again, Honey pops up at the very end, but I guess it's kind of like, well, he can't do much about it because they're not at the school. They're at Pop's place doing the performance and everything. But some just like, I'm curious to see what they end up doing that. Maybe it'll blow up into something more, maybe not. I mean, I think it should speak volumes that there was at least one set of parents there, Alice and FP. So I think that should speak volumes, but whatever the case may be. But along with all of that, there is a situation where Jughead was looking out in the crowd. He sees all those people recording. He's like, is this what the person behind the videotaper was all about? Is this their thing? Like, are they actually out there viewing us right now and we don't even know it? And then he goes and views a tape that's basically him, someone wearing like a character mask of him, and then like a character mask Betty comes over, bashes him in the head. Now the question is was that a real murder that took place? Because that looked like could that just been someone they kidnapped, put a Jughead mask on, and actually murdered them, but was dressed as Betty? That's what I'm curious. Or was that just kind of all meant to just? It seemed like those blows were real. I could be mistaken, but that seemed like that was real. So it's like a straight up murder meant to replicate what went down with them, which is interesting because I mean, not unless that's public knowledge. That's what I'm curious. Like, how much of that is public knowledge? I mean, to be fair, Alice did her own expose, so it's like, it's not too, but it's just like interesting, like that's probably what set this in motion of like, oh, like just when you want to get back to normal after like that's what I'm like wondering. It's like, why now? So my immediate thought is this has to be Charles and Chick. They have to be the ones behind this, because like they set it up at the beginning that like he's trying to disarm Betty by making her think like, oh, I'm here, I'm your friend, your ally, but him and Chick have something cooked up for whatever reason, because I'm sure it's like, oh, he's acting okay, but I'm sure he wants to get payback at his family, because it's like, my mom abandoned me, but she's fine with keeping you, but she abandoned me. F her, and screw you too for being a child that they loved instead of me. So I'm sure all of that turns into resentment, because I'm sure he also resents FP too, because it's like, you're my dad and everything. So I'm sure on that same level he also resents probably Jelly Bean and Jughead, because I'm sure that's even more of an FU, because it's like, not only did you have one other kid, you had two. I'm even slipping my mind too. It's like, right, I completely forgot. So did Alice. She had Polly as well. So it's like, that's more of a middle finger of like, neither one of you wanted me, and you both went off and had two more children, so that's where I think that resentment comes from. And I think maybe Charles just in general hates the town, maybe Chick is trying to get back his revenge, because it's like, he's kind of a hustler himself, but also like Betty was going to leave him to be a victim to the Black Mask, the Black Hood. Crossing my universes there, Black Hood and not Black Mask from DC. Sorry about that, but that's what I'm assuming it's them. Maybe it's not, because at the very least because that's the thing, like, we don't know who was behind that Betty mask. It doesn't mean it had to be a girl, but that makes you wonder, is it much bigger than we think it is? I don't know. Like I said, I would assume just because of Alice's expose, it could be anyone in Riverdale, because I'm about to say, like, only a limited number of people knew the intimate details like that. To be fair, it could be that the voyeur, because that's what they've actually been calling them, the voyeur probably was actually out there when it went down, so maybe that's what incited them to do this, of like, oh, this was so exciting. And it's kind of like, since I made a reference to the Magicians TV show, let's talk about, this shows more Despicable Hyman. If you're familiar with the Magicians, you're familiar with the character Hyman, you know what I'm talking about. This is a more despicable version of that. That was like a more comedy version of it. This is a more like sinister, like I'm curious. Is it the same thing? Is it Charles and Chet, or is that something completely separate, like, from this? I'd assume it's connected, but I could be wrong. I'm really interested to kind of see ultimately where all that ends up taking us, like, you know, going forward. I wonder, are there any more tapes like that? Are there going to be any more that are going to be personal like that? Like maybe some personal tragedy, like for example, maybe someone like for like Archie maybe recreating when his dad got shot, or you know, for whatever reason, maybe when he got attacked by a bear or something, like, you know, some traumatic shit that's happened to him, and then so on and so forth. Like maybe because obviously the whole thing is like, yeah, you know, Charles, I said the last thing I want to see is like when the voyeur actually gets inside the house, so it's like even get personal like that on that level too. Maybe, like I said, I'm just kind of throwing out some thoughts. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything takes us going forward. I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good